Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I am your host, Tanya Shrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Thanks to both of you, and I know you're exhausted, but thank you for being here today.
Of course.
Well,
How you doing,
Thad's the
Tanya?
one that's exhausted.
Well, we're going to get through this, and hopefully Thad can get some much needed, much deserved rest later today.
At least more coffee is in my future.
Well, we're going to switch it up because coming to this week's edition of the cover story, we have a lovely story by Jennifer. Would you like to tell us what's coming to this week's cover?
Yes, this isn't like a big, giant cover story, deep dive sort of thing, but we love this food so much that we decided to put it on the cover since we have a bunch of stories crowding the issue, which Thad will get to. But I don't know if you remember that a while ago we wrote about a place called Harbor Wine and Coffee Bar, like over in Myrtletown and in Eureka. And that sadly closed. These things happen. People go on, have other adventures, businesses fall away, people have their lives, etc. I'm sorry for all of you who really enjoy being able to have wine and coffee at a schmancy little corner of Myrtletown that, by the way, used to be a Subway, which is, I don't know, one of your bigger glow ups. Anyway, so now it has become Aroma's Cafe. If you missed that happening, you're not crazy. There hasn't been like a big to-do, a big giant, social media campaign or anything like that. And they've kind of taken it slow since December when the softest of soft openings happened. Marisol Madriz and Adela Rodriguez, who are the co-owners of this place, which they reminded me that aromas means the same thing in English and Spanish. And so that's sort of why they chose the name. They have put together a different kind of cafe than I think we've had in Humboldt before, which is a coffee bar, cappuccinos, espressos, et cetera, and your general cafe treats, snacks, etc., bagels, but also some Mexican dishes, which, I mean, if you think about it, if you go to a cafe in Mexico, it's going to have coffee and Mexican dishes. It is not a typical Mexican restaurant as we would find in Humboldt County most of the time. So there are mostly sort of like breakfasty, brunchy, lunchy things. And what we really were interested in was the breakfast option. Although it should be noted that everybody and their mother has sent me photos of the pozole over there. And yesterday I tried it for the first time and it's lovely. And some of the folks at the Humboldt County Office of Elections were enjoying it too because they had a catered dinner from there because they were up all night too. Anywho, so one of the things that was cool was, we went in there to try Mexican crepes, which are a little bit different than the French variety. They're very springy, they're very nice. They have a little bit of sweetness and they make all sorts of sweet ones. Like there's a pecan one that if you squint your eyes, it looks like a piece of pecan pie, a pecan caramel crepe. There are all kinds of, all the beloved whipped cream and fruit varieties. But then there's also this one that we tried that was just lovely. And it is chorizo and potato. Ooh. And that is like so nice, a nice warm, like stick to your ribs breakfast of like that little bit of sweetness and then the spicy, smoky, salty chorizo and then the potato. It's just lovely. And on a cold, rainy day, it like saved my life. Also, They make a nice chilaquiles. There's the red chilaquiles, there's the green chilaquiles, but they will also half and half for you because you should not have to choose. This is a very hard time in the world, and you should not also have to choose but one salsa. Anyway, they're lovely. They're all fresh made by Adela. Interestingly, these two split the labor pretty much in half. Other than some prep work, Marisol is up front of house, doing all the books in the back and doing kind of the business and customer service angle of the restaurant. But then in the back, it's all Adela's show. Marisol told me she also cooks, but Adela is the queen here. So when it comes to their relationship, it's kind of, that was sort of the interesting part to me because they are besties. How many times have you thought about opening a cafe with your bestie? They actually did it. And they talked a lot about how they just really trust each other and how they couldn't have done this business with somebody who was, not so close to them. And they are literally working 7 days a week. And then when they clock out, they go hang out more.
What I really liked is that she talks about this sense of trust that these best friends, friend family have created,
Right.
but it was that she did not feel that she got conducive or constructive criticism, honestly, on her dishes.
Yes, they trust each other with their lives, except Adela does not trust Marisol's opinion on her cooking because she's like, no, she thinks I'm perfect. She thinks everything is perfect and doesn't need to be improved. And, I can't trust her at all for that. And it was very cute. Anyway, it's a great shop. And that, that warmth really exudes into the cafe. And it's a fun weekend breakfast. You can stop by. They start at like 7:30 in the morning. So that's a reasonable commute, grab and go breakfast. And anyway, they're lovely ladies and we wish them well. And I hope you guys enjoy it.
Yes, and I would like everybody to not only visit Aromas Cafe, but pick up this week's edition of the North Coast Journal and read the article about their background and how they came together. Thank you, Jennifer. We are going to pivot quickly back to Thad and get caught up on all this week's juicy news. I know we want to talk about the election, so Thad, can you fill us in on this week's Journal news?
Yeah, well, first, very disappointed to report my election night did not include pozole. So election staff was one up on me. But yeah, so I spent last night covering the returns of all things local elections. And gotta say, not a lot of drama, not a lot of suspense. It was pretty much races were decided from the first returns and kind of stayed that way. By and large, there's a couple exceptions, but I think the biggest news out of Election Day is that Measure A in Humboldt County, that's the Cannabis Reform Initiative, was just decidedly shot down and rejected by voters. I think 73% of county voters voted against it, which is a pretty extraordinary number for a ballot measure. It is not a margin you see very often. So in addition to that, the incumbents just kind of took the supervisors' races, again, pretty decisively. Michelle Bushnell was the closest, edging Jenna McClendon down in the second district. I think Supervisor Bushnell took 58% of the vote. In the first district, Rex Bone took 64%, and then up in the third, Mike Wilson took 80%. So those are all pretty lopsided margins. Should say that that we have about 20% of ballots from registered voters have been counted so far. There are no doubt another, at least 20,000 ballots yet to be counted. Well, I should say at least 10,000 ballots yet to be counted. So we have called these races, just looking at kind of the trajectory from the returns, from the early voting, from the tallies at the polls on Election Day, and just looking at it as there would have to be kind of a huge statistical anomaly for these races to change. But there still are lots of uncounted ballots, I should note. So other races of note, April Van Dyke, the challenger in the kind of unusually contested and contentious judicial election, has unseated Greg Krice, who is the embattled incumbent. He's the one appointed by Jerry Brown back in 2017, who has gotten himself into all kinds of bad headlines lately. Has actually made national news. He's been accused by the Commission on Judicial Performance, the judicial oversight group in California, of 19 counts of unethical behavior and malfeasance, and no doubt that absolutely changed the course of this race. Those allegations dropped about a month before Election Day. They have not been adjudicated, so they have not been determined to be accurate or not. But the filing of them, I think, proved enough to really give April Van Dyke, a pretty much an unheard of local attorney with pretty limited experience, a leg up in that race. And she finished with 60% of the vote on election night. So she is a pretty commanding lead, too. Things are a lot tighter and kind of more interesting, honestly, in the Assembly District race. So folks will remember this is a race with a really broad field. I think there's close to 10 candidates from throughout the 2nd Assembly District, which stretches all the way down to past Santa Rosa and up to the Oregon border. And it was too close to call as we went to press this morning. But what is certain is that Republican Michael Greer, a school board member from Del Norte County, is going to advance to the runoff in November. And he will likely face either Rusty Hicks, the newly Arcata-based chair of the California Democratic Party, who is kind of a political heavyweight who threw his hat in for this race. And so it'll either be him or Chris Rogers, likely. Chris Rogers is the Santa Rosa council member who polled, really did not do well at the polls here in Humboldt County. I think he was virtually unknown, but really polled well in the more population-heavy parts of the district, so down toward the Santa Rosa way. So they are locked in kind of a virtual dead heat, and over the next weeks, as those final ballots get tabulated, they'll determine which one of those goes off to face Michael Greer in November. I think the only other kind of really local race of note is the U.S. House of Representatives, District 2. Incumbent Jaron Huffman just rolled in that race, getting 72+% of the vote. And that is, because it's a federal or state office, it'll go to the top 2 primaries. So he will advance to November and face off against Republican Chris Cullum, who finished with, I think, about 17% of the vote, which was far more than anyone else in the field.
Thank you for the updates, Thad. And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was that you reported that voter turnout was overall a little slumped.
Yeah, again, we only have ballots from about 20% of registered voters at this point, which I think, I can't remember exactly what we reported. It's well off the pace from the primary 4 years ago, the last presidential primary we had. I heard while watching the returns come back last night, I heard Juan Pablo Cervantes, the registrar of voters for the county, interviewed on KMUD, and he said, that there's no question about it. It is a very low turnout countywide. Although he said it seemed, anecdotally at that point that we were doing a little bit better than statewide, but seems like a pretty muted turnout throughout California this year.
Well, thank you for that update, Thad. And would you like to briefly touch on some of the other news coming to this week's North Coast Journal?
Yeah, absolutely, Tanya. We had 2 other stories this week that are both just kind of following up on things we've been reporting on for months and months, and it feels like forever now. But so we reported a while back that the Travis Schneider agreement to settle the kind of pervasive permit violations on his still under construction family mansion on Walker Point Road off Indianola Cutoff so that was appealed to the California Coastal Commission, which has jurisdiction. And so that has finally been set to a hearing and will be heard March 15th by the commission. And so the story kind of just details kind of what that process looks like. First, it'll come before the Coastal Commission, which just has to determine whether the appeal raises substantial issues. And the Coastal Commission staff is recommending that it does, and really focusing on two areas. One is whether this agreement does enough to protect the tribal cultural resources on the site. There is a long documented and apparently fairly intact former Wiyot Village site on the site, and basically, the Coastal Commission staff feels like the agreement struck with the county planning department and the permits approved by the planning commission in Humboldt County didn't do enough to link kind of that action to a compliance agreement that Mr. Schneider entered into to really make it all binding. So they're saying it doesn't really do enough to protect the long-term integrity of the archaeological sites, and then also that the plans kind of lack specificity as far as the environmentally sensitive habitat on the property, which abuts the Fay Wildlife Area, Fay Slough Wildlife Area, which is a protected area. So if the commission kind of agrees with the staff recommendation and finds the appeal raises substantial issues, then this thing will go to a full hearing before the Coastal Commission. And what's interesting there, and I think I've talked about this before, but is that kind of if it goes to that stage, then it's like we start all over again of this, and the Coastal Commission really is then the permitting agency and can really like look at this entire thing from scratch again, which is honestly something that Travis Schneider and the county planning department have long kind of sought to avoid. They really wanted to, planning department staff and the planning commission itself have really talked about wanting to retain local control over this project. And I mean, I think they want to do that over all projects, but it was certainly something talked about in this case. But that appears unlikely to be the case moving forward.
Excellent. And I appreciate the update of these unfolding stories, including the other mystery that's been swirling around Eureka for months now.
Yeah, so this is, some people have given me a hard time about the kind of non-update updates about Eureka City Schools, Jacobs Campus land exchange or property exchange deal. And I get it. It's really hard to scrape like any actual tangible information out of this, but we just feel like we got to kind of keep reporting on it.
I feel bad for Thad. It's kind of like running one of those Bigfoot hunting shows.
Right.
Like, is this the week they find him?
Hey, look, the magnifying glass is getting larger and larger. He's trying, folks. He's trying.
Yeah. So I hope everybody reads the story, but spoiler alert, we don't know who's buying the Jacobs campus or trying to. And every investigative reporting technique we use, every records request we file, everything we kind of uncover just seems to raise more questions than answers. So it's, I assure you readers, it's a frustrating endeavor for me too. But this week I report on some documents I received from the district under a California public records request. And really, honestly, kind of a focal point of the story is the documents that I expected to get and didn't get. So folks will remember that, Eureka City Schools kind of veered left out of nowhere back in December. And while it had been in negotiations to sell the former Jacobs campus, an 8-acre property in Eureka, to the California Highway Patrol, it kind of at the 11th hour entered into this kind of unusual property exchange agreement where it was trading the Jacobs property for a small residential property and $5.35 million in cash to a freshly formed LLC that nobody knows anything about, including seemingly the district. And so we've been trying to kind of determine who's behind this LLC, what their intentions are with the property, and have just been met with kind of very opaque answers at kind of every turn. So I filed a records request looking for correspondences primarily between district officials, primarily former Superintendent Fred Van Vleck, who's negotiating on behalf of the district for this in these property exchanges or property deals, wanting to kind of get any correspondences with anybody with interest in the property that weren't the two known entities at that point, which was the California Highway Patrol and Eureka and the city of Eureka, which had previously been negotiating for the property. And I expected to see, if nothing really substantial, either some just kind of run-of-the-mill, like meeting settings, scheduling site visits and things like that might give us some clues about kind of, the timeline and trajectory of this agreement that ultimately came to be, and then also maybe who was involved beyond the lawyers. At this point, we only know 2 lawyers representing this LLC have been involved. And then I expected, honestly, also to see some kind of celebratory, emails and correspondences after this deal was approved by the school board. This was a years-long effort from the district, and, on the eve of kind of leaving his post into retirement, Fred Van Vleck secured this deal, which, objectively kind of should have been considered a huge win for him in the district, because it was, for $1.35 million more than had been on the table, which is, more money for the school district, more money for the kids. You'd think there'd be lots of cause for celebration. And what I got back from the district is that none of these correspondences exist, that the district searched through, Mr. Van Vleck's emails, and text messages, and what we got back was him forwarding the press release from the district announcing the agreement to somebody as part of a national nonprofit organization, and the school board president texting him before the meeting at which this was approved, a headline of a Lost Coast Outpost story about this kind of mysterious deal that was about to be approved. So really strange. And I don't honestly quite know what to make of it, other than it is weird to have, in any government setting, a $6 million transaction without a paper trail.
Well, I think the next move will be the entire preview team in an old El Camino on a stakeout outside the site.
Who do we stake out, Tanya?
We can get a Roma Cafe delivered,
right?
And
I'm already purchasing snacks in my mind.
I mean, if there's pozole, I'll give it a shot.
Well, thank you so much for continuing to dig into this. I know we will eventually get the answers. And just a quick pivot, I think we have about 2 minutes left for Jennifer to tell us about the Wandering Meatloaf briefly.
I know. Did I want the Wandering Meatloaf to be a food truck? I did. But in fact, it is some sort of chitinous creature that Mike Kelly is writing about this week in Washed Up. And I just want to harken back to the renaming of creatures, renaming of birds and all this stuff. I think that Mike Kelly should be in charge of renaming some things.
I think that's a marvelous idea.
Right. If something, or maybe just like marine biology, tide poolers, these people are practical. Something looked like a little meatloaf that was moving under the water, and they called it a wandering meatloaf. That's what I'm looking for. But this thing has crazy feet that look like sort of like armor plating or teeth or something, and you have to read it. It is his wild interpretation, but also it's a wild creature that's just out here existing in front of us and not looking like anything else that I've seen. It can apparently snip the tentacles off starfish with its weird plate feet. I don't understand how it works, but if you're looking for your summer beach body, it might be having chitinous plates on your belly and looking sort of like a meatloaf that moves.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for highlighting that briefly for us. I encourage everybody to pick up this week's North Coast Journal and every week's and read the entire story for yourselves. Well, that wraps up this week in the current edition of the North Coast Journal is available now on newsstands, or, of course, you can pick it up online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Shrum. Thanks for being with us all and staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community. Make sure you register to vote for November, folks.